There was the bell, I think. That was a bell. Okay. What else would it be? I've got handouts. If I could have handouters, and I can. Thank you, friend. Thank you, Larry. Come in, come in. Smart. Greetings again.
That's what he listens to. Well, really? They've got a pretty They do, and they have everything that's a little bit high.
As you're going words, that's what we're talking about tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I give y'all a heads up. We're going to have some announcements tonight. They'll be brief, but there's so much happening. We just need to have announcements on Wednesday night, okay? So we will. But you know me, I'm brief, so. As we're going words. Proverbs. Let us sort of set the stage for a verse that is going to expand in a bit. Proverbs 18:21 tells us something about the power of the tongue, which I forgot my last quotation mark, so we just keep on quoting forever. It's like people who say quote unquote. It's like there's nothing in there. Isn't there? The Bible says a good bit about the tongue. James comes to mind, and we'll have a James verse here in just a bit, a couple of them actually. And we've all either experienced that or seen that about how somebody's tongue has, either for good or ill, powerfully impacted somebody. And it's, you know, you remember as kids, they said this incredibly stupid thing. We don't have any children here to hear me say stupid, do we? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's what people said when they were hurt by words and didn't want you to know, even though you could tell. So, broken bones heal. Sometimes words spoken don't. Even if we regret saying things, we can't unsay them. It's like we talk about sometimes that there are things you can't unsee. We all probably have something up here that we wish we hadn't seen, but we did, and it's just there, you know. Well, there are things you can't unhear. Now, you can move on. You should at times. But words are very powerful things. Now, when it comes to evangelism, I have a little article. I know you're all, just can't wait till Sunday till you can read the little bulletin article. I'll give you a little teaser just to reinforce your desires. That has to do with how there is an ingredient in evangelism that we don't talk about. we're talking about tonight, by the way. Okay, I'm going to set up a situation for you. Person comes to a gathering. This is actually a true story. He's been thinking about, I need to be, I guess you say religious, something like that. And Jesse may be talking about this somewhere down the road as well. And so he comes, checking out, if he wants to check out further. He decides he doesn't want to check out further because the people he came to be around in a Jesus context got in heated discussions about politics. And he decided he just didn't want any part of that and didn't come back. That's, of course, in a mythical place far, far away. Actually, it was right here. Sometimes we mean well. We don't mean to say things that will put people off. But one of the things I want to propose to you is, as we go through this and hopefully validate it, our idle words have a lot to say about where we are. It may not be horrible stuff. Political discussions are not horrible. But if somebody's looking for Jesus and they get the feeling that, we're going to about politics, it's probably not going to help them a lot. And Jesus ought to get a certain amount of attention regularly with us, just as a natural thing. Whatever comes out. Sarah's here, so I'll have to clean this up a lot. But sometimes if you go in a kitchen and turn on the light, you find out if you got roaches or not. Now, if you did that in our kitchen, you would never find out that we had roaches because, of course, we don't. Because roaches actually send messages to other roaches, don't go to the Jones house because it's so clean, you will die within minutes of entering the home. This is true. I've got it on good authority. Heard it from roaches out and about. That's what they tell people. But that. Has anybody ever, not me of course, but has anybody ever turned on the light when it's dark and seen little critters scurrying? Uh-oh, some of you have. You might even find a mouse or something if you're not careful. They were there all the time, were they not? But you didn't know they were there until that fateful light went on. Now, the same is true as us. When we're in unguarded moments, and we all, I'm thinking about it for this lesson, I think, Edwin, you need to preach to yourself. Sometimes we just let something out, we're not thinking about it, and once it's out, it's out. So what naturally comes out of us? It doesn't mean we can't cut up and can't have a good time. And I'm not talking about that as idle words or talking about sports or whatever. I'm talking about things that reveal more about us and where we're coming from than we would care to have revealed. So the Bible has a lot to say about that. And when we stop to think about it, we can realize how those unconscious moments can actually be a big influence on other people, because that tends to say more about us sometimes than when we're on guard. I've known people that when they were on guard, man, perfect. Like there's Facebook perfect, where you're the best person of whatever, you're the best mom, you're the best wife, you're the best husband, you're the best this, you're the best that on Facebook, because you can do that, but you're not really. When you're, and some people just don't care on Facebook. They just have their unguarded moments in front of everybody. But the tongue is a powerful thing. Let's just look at this a little bit more. Matthew 12, 34 to 37, which is where I'm going to get the verse that we're going to expand on. Matthew 12, 34 to 37. Would somebody like to read that for us, please? I'm going to provide you with a microphone. This is an interesting chapter. It's got stuff about blasphemy against the Holy Spirit and all kinds of things. But 34 through 37 of chapter 12 of Matthew, please.
Brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth evil things. But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned.
That sounds fairly serious, doesn't it? Because it is. So, what does this mean? Depending upon your translation, you may have idle, you may have empty, you may have careless, all of which are okay, as for the words that we speak. And again, this doesn't mean everything you speak without thinking about it is a bad thing. No, it can be perfectly all right. But if there are things in there that don't need to be in there, they tend to come out unguarded. Just poop, poop, blurt something out, you know? And so, what does this mean? This empty words, idle words, careless words. It means words that are inactive or unprofitable. And again, there are some things we can say that aren't profitable necessarily, but they're not destructive. They're just, the musings of life. What this tells us here is what he's talking about is, as we say around here, straight from the heart. The heart as a way of coming out. Jesus talks about this in Mark 7, Matthew 15, when he talks about food going in you doesn't contaminate you. They were doing the washing of hands things. They're not washing their hands. And then he had to go off to the side and explain to them, and he had to get really graphic. He basically said, he literally says, when it goes in the latrine, it's out, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about words, things that we speak. And it's tied to judgment. On Judgment Day, if there are things within us that ought not to be there, again, I'm not talking about nobody's perfect, but if we've got things going on in there that reflect some very unbiblical thoughts, some very unbiblical things, we're going to be able to keep them secret because they'll be revealed. I grew up in the South. How many people grew up in the South? And I go back a ways, as you know. I go back to segregation days. And I will tell you, there were words spoken that had nothing to do with Jesus or God or anybody else by people who profess to be Christians toward other human beings created in the image of God. Because that was in them. And it was legit, in many cases, it was legit hatred. That these are inferior people and they deserve to be treated as inferior people. My wife wondered at some point in her upbringing, and they had a special show on public television one time about her hometown, as along with someplace in South Carolina, the most backward southern towns in the United States. And as she wondered, they let this lady of color raise me. And yet, here's how they talk about her. And it didn't seem like it fit, because it doesn't. I remember one time, there were two back doors. You could only come in one of them if you were of color. The other one, no. And it was time to feed the person that was in the backyard, and everybody just poured their leftover tea in a glass and gave it to him. One time my daughter, bless her heart, wanted to take somebody to look at the Christmas tree in a room he couldn't go in. She couldn't understand it. She shouldn't have been able to understand it. They had a funeral. Probably the best friend the gentleman who had died had was of color. But he had to stand up on the overlooking hill. People that he couldn't care, didn't really like, were closer to him. That's something I saw. That's something I observed about inward feelings that would come out, and they would be ugly. And there's many examples of that. Everybody in the South wasn't that way, I know that. But there was a lot of that going on because you could get away with it, if you will, because that's what people said, and that's what they did, and that's how they treated people. Well, that goes on. Okay, might as well get personal about it. Might we not? What about people from south of the border? How are we going to treat them? I don't like immigration laws the way they are. I don't. Everybody always talks about they need to do something about it, then the other party gets elected and they don't do anything about it. But there's a lot in the Old Testament about how you treat strangers among you. And they're to be treated just like you, the golden, or the love your neighbor as yourself. If you read on a little bit further in Leviticus, it talks about treating the stranger among you just like you do a brother. That's just biblical stuff. That's just how we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be different. So idle words can come out about human beings. And I realize people take advantage of the system. I realize the system is broken. I understand all of that. But if I were living in some of the situations that some of those people live in, I might be trying to get over here too. We've got it good. That's all I'm going to say about that. But you can come up with all kind of things. Each of us could come up with something or more than one thing where there's an area where people just kind of, they haven't clued in on what being a Christian's about and how they need to talk. And I have done it, and I don't doubt I won't maybe do it again. But it's important for evangelism's sake. Because if I treat you and speak of you in a subhuman way, what chance do I have to talk to you about Jesus in a profitable way? I don't. If you spoke of me like, I grew up in a bad neighborhood. The house was condemned. Parents were, how shall we say, dysfunctional. And I heard remarks that people would make about where I lived. And it didn't give me the warm fuzzies. I couldn't help it. I was just a kid living there. So anyway, I trust I've made that point. Ephesians 4:29. Colossians has a somewhat parallel to it, but since you've got the mic and since you do such a good job of reading, Larry, it's not my fault, it's yours that you do. Would you please read Ephesians 4:29? Larry's hearing aid is kicked in. You take your time, take your time. By the way, in a couple of 3 weeks, Larry's going to be in here teaching a class. Thank you, Larry. And I'm going to be down there in what is the ladies' classroom on Sunday teaching a class. And Jesse's going to be over yonder teaching a class where he is now.
Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers.
That's pretty plain spoken, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't you like for people to talk to you like that? I would. Well, there's a parallel in Colossians 4, 5, and 6, and if you will, I'll leave you alone after this. Colossians 4, 5, and 6, maybe. Four, 5, 6. Chapter 4, 5, and 6.
Walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one.
Okay. That hard to understand? That's everyday life. That's as you were going, encountering people and the mix of people out there and how we deal with that. just folks, if you will. Now, if I were in, let me think, maybe New York City, I might talk about Republicans. But since I'm here, I'll talk about Democrats. Would I like to convert Democrats? Does Jesus want me to try to convert Democrats who believe things politically that I find not only distasteful, but at times repugnant? Because Jesus came to a world dealing with people that he found distasteful and repugnant. And he died for them. So, he wants me to do the Ephesians 4:29 and the Colossians 4:5 and 6 as I'm going with real people to influence them. You know, those Jesus people, they respect that people are created in the image of God. They respect and believe what they say about this Jesus, that he wants people saved. He came to seek and save the lost. And actions and unguarded words speak volumes to people. James 3:8, in the midst of the tongue thing in James. And who can tame the tongue? What does he say? Does he allow that somebody can tame the tongue? He allows that nobody can tame the tongue. Certain hyperbole there perhaps, or perhaps not. When we try to tame it, we realize it's quite unruly. So, what do we need to do? Look at Proverbs 14, 141, Psalms 140, I'll get in a minute. Psalms 141:3. Set a guard over, that's supposed to be I left the M out, let's run out of M's. Set a guard over my mouth. So, if you were plowing with a mule, I knew a guy who preached to congregations who plowed with mules. And do you ever tame a mule? Where, hey, let's go plow, and then you just wait till you finish, and he knows when you're finished. He stops and docilely waits while you unharness him and everything like that. Well, no. But you do what? You restrain him. You remember when Paul was encountered by Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he said, it is difficult for you to kick against the goads. What was he talking about? Oxen. And they had a sharp stick to where if the oxen wanted to kick up and go, it would hurt him, so he wouldn't. The oxen wasn't tamed, but restrained. And so, since the tongue has a way of not getting tamed, it can be restrained. You know, it's like, I'm not going to do that. As opposed to, I wouldn't do that. You know, you ever had one of those moments where you really like to say something, but you know if you do what's going to happen? And sometimes you do, and it happens, and you wonder, why did I say that? So, as we're going in life, these things come up. People are watching us. Jesus said that we're to let our light shine before men, people, so that they will see our good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven. My life should be something taken as a whole that people could see along the way as I'm going, that God means a lot to me, and that's why I behave the way I do. And by the way, that's a pretty good way to live.